thanks a lot for joining us this evening. And we will be starting now. After our panel discussion, there will be a networking reception and coffee, so please feel free to stay with us after we are finished. So today we will be discussing the maturity of the Sustainable Development Goals framework, but also how do we keep momentum in the world that is becoming more and more volatile. And we do see right now geopolitical context taking over the agenda. While on the ESG and SDG side, the regulatory part is definitely in the focus, but we cannot probably underestimate the fact that this year 5 billion people around the world will be going to the election, and there will be possibly the biggest political change that we've seen. And we see here in Europe big challenges related to the European law related to the sustainability CSRD directive that comes into place that really defines the global sustainability agenda and the global agenda when it comes to the reporting, creating a global standard. We're also seeing definitely increased regulatory pressure. And what we thought would be interesting before we go to the panel, we looked actually at some of our studies that we did that were related to the SDGs over the years. And it has been 10 years actually that we started analyzing the corporate engagement and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this evolution is actually quite telling. In 2016 we had this headline, "Not yet ready, confusing landscape, the NGOs are leading the discourse." In 2017 we saw some early champions, also SDGs as a space for thought leadership and broader move of the companies from the concepts of CSR towards the sustainability. Then in 2018, we saw more focus on the goals themselves, also on relevance that is driven by the headquarters of the organization. Then in 2019, we start to seeing more mature companies setting and communicating concrete contributions, also high push of the environmental agenda. In 2020, just before COVID, we had this event here in the SDG tent, and we were looking at the research related to the risks and what are the biggest risk factors for business from the international discourse. And interestingly enough, the social risks were coming the highest on the agenda, and that was kind of showcasing the broadening of the ESG discourse and setting of the expectations. Then we saw in 2021 the increased consumer expectations and also pressure to deliver and rethinking the business model, which was driven a lot by the impacts of COVID on the society. And then in 2022, obviously the war starts and the governance becomes the spotlight. Interestingly enough, in 2022, when we did a big study in several markets linking the different elements of the ESG frameworks to the consumer trust, it was actually the governance issues that were the highest drivers of the trust, not the environmental, not the social. And it was an interesting observation. We believe that it was driven a lot because of the war and because of the discourse at the time of the do we do business, how do we deal with war, etc. And then obviously this year we see the maturity of the reporting. We did several studies in markets such as Switzerland, UK, and some of the others. We also looked at the maturity levels of the trade associations and non-governmental organizations. Interestingly enough, if you look at pure maturity frameworks, the non-governmental organizations are the ones that are the least mature in their own approach towards the sustainability and sustainability engagements. So some of those observations lead that were mentioned. We definitely saw this move from compliance to competitive advantage. We also saw this high level of expectation from the European consumers. In this year's studies, we saw some notable gaps, and in the Swiss study, the SDG alignment is still lacking for many companies. Even the companies that are the most mature in their ESG approaches, they don't necessarily link aligning their sustainability strategies and approaches with the global frameworks. And we believe that it's something really worth discussing. Why does it happen this way? Then similarly, we saw in the Brussels study looking at the leading trade associations that there is a lack of alignment with the SDG framework, which is surprising because EU is putting a lot of importance into the SDG agenda, into the regulatory framework, and those who are influencing that on behalf of the industry seem not to be really embracing that. And then if we look at the industries in the maturity scoring, we will see that actually healthcare industry is probably showcasing the lowest level of maturity, while some of the, let's say, controversial industries such as mining and oil or manufacturing and construction are very high because they consider the ESG as the risk factor, therefore their reporting is pretty advanced. As someone said at one of the panels where I participated this year, the problem with the ESG regulatory landscape is that actually those days you are getting a higher fine for reporting wrongly that you dumped some chemicals into the forest than actually dumping them into the forest. So there is a question how to really align that with the real action. And we do see this global expectation gap, and this gap can be met by a higher level of maturity of the companies and organizations, and that requires really alignment at both organizational, strategic, and tactical level. So this need of alignment is definitely increased. We also need to be used to navigate even higher level of complexity of different regulatory requirements and changing volatile context. And also there needs to be a shift industry-wise from to the race to the top, from the race to the bottom, because a lot of the frameworks are created in order to accommodate the worst company in a certain setting or the one who is the biggest lagger. So we need to probably rethink the approach and starting to think how do we actually create this race to the top and how that really translates into the external readership. And that means getting it right, getting it on purpose, and we'll be discussing that purpose quite a lot during the panel today, because there is a gap, but equally there is a great potential. And interestingly enough, in the maturity studies that we delivered across all the sectors and geographies, the elements that always see the highest level of improvement are external partnerships and cultural integration. And we believe also that this cultural integration in the corporations will be paramount in order to move the needle across the industries. So how to navigate those ESG requirements? Obviously, we need to understand. So there is an aspect of materiality analysis and reputation, obviously designing the organization for success, connecting with the framework. Also looking at the reporting not only on the activities but also on the outcomes. If you read through and have a pleasure reading through, and Thomas probably has that pleasure on the daily basis of different ESG reports and disclosures of different companies, majority of the reporting which you see is on the activities and not actual achievements. And obviously we need to engage beyond regular suspects. So in summary, we believe that it is about going beyond the E, also setting the mid and short-term goals, because it's quite easy to set the 2050 goals, but what is the pathway towards them, engaging continuously and probably moving from reporting to advocating. So to discuss those questions, we're extremely happy to have the panel with us tonight. So Arne Cartridge, he's special advisor at Yara International. Dr. Thomas Honne-Sparbroch, he's head of sustainability research at Holistic Investment Partners, which is part of the Lombard-Odier Group. Then Sahil Devsu, she's chief strategy officer of SCT. And Natalia Yamchenko, who is Director of Public Relations and Communications of the SCM Group, which is the largest privately owned company in Ukraine, and also board member of the Rinat Akhmetov Foundation. So to set this in, before we go to panel, I asked, and Natalia kindly agreed, to do a 10 minutes introduction to our discussion, because if it comes to the volatility and if it comes to dealing with the most adverse environments and managing the business during the war is probably the strongest example. So please welcome Natalia, and then we'll welcome all the panelists.
Like this?
Yep.
Good evening. I'm happy to see all of you. So probably I will tell you a little bit about SCM. SCM is an investment company, international one, but our main operations are in Ukraine. We are biggest privately owned group of businesses in Ukraine. And before the war, and again, when I'm talking about war, I'm talking about war which started in 2014, because for us it started in 2014. We employed more than 300,000 people. Right now it's like 180,000. So we lost our assets twice. First time we lost like 30% of our operations in Crimea and in Donetsk region. And right now, for example, we own 2 steel plants in Mariupol, which are occupied and actually destroyed. And in February 2022, there were like 30,000 employees in Mariupol. And we know what is going on with only like 18,000 people. Most of them are in territory right now, on the territory controlled by Ukraine. We don't know what is going on with 12,000 people because even in accordance with official statistics and due to March 18 of 2022, like 3 weeks from the beginning of full-scale invasion, in Mariupol died officially like 22,000 of civilians. So we don't know final number. We think that it's up to 80,000 people, but we don't know. So 22,000 people died in Mariupol officially. So it's like a fixed number, and we unfortunately think that part of them are our employees. So just to explain the context. And despite of that, we are not only operate, we invest a lot. Even right now, for example, in 2023, we finished first stage of brand new greenfield wind power in Nikolaevsk region. It's like 100 kilometers from the front line. And we did it, and we started right now the second investment stage altogether with Vestas. And it's absolutely unprecedented because honestly, actually it would be the biggest wind farm in Europe when we will finish it in Ukraine during the war. And we not only invest, we invested in a way which will bring us closer to European Union. So actually it's not about just investing, it's about investing in accordance with European priorities, because we are big protagonists of European integration of Ukraine. And in December 2023, it was a big decision regarding negotiations of membership, and actually for us it's like a very big signal. Lukasz asked me to say whether ESG is something which is really on the agenda for Ukraine, because we are inside of perfect storm, definitely. And I would like to say that we are very in line with ESG, especially with G, with governance. Actually, governance is the main thing, and we have very good corporate governance inside of our business. The best one one of the best in Ukraine, and it's world class. And exactly governance. Institutional board, institutionalized boards, transparency, good relations, and very clear decision-making process, good relations with creditors, partners, etc. So exactly governance was the reason and factor which helps us to react effectively and quite oh my God, how it would be in English, quite fast in 2014. And exactly good government helps us right now to serve our debts, because we have, for example, we have green euro obligations, our energy company, which is traded here in Europe, and we have amazing bank limitations, financial limitations from national bank, and we are not able to pay percents on our debts because of regulations. We have money, we have enough money, but we can't pay it from Ukraine to our debtors. Nevertheless, exactly, corporate governance, very good. Trust, relations with our partners helps us not only survive, but also invest and develop. And after the beginning of this war, actually we lost a lot and then grew up fastly. And right now we lost a lot, and probably we will lose something else. For example, we have the biggest coke plant.
Coal.
In Avdiivka, and actually it's almost totally destroyed. It's still on the territory which is controlled by Ukraine, but actually plant does not exist anymore. The same, we have power plant in Kurakhova, and it's quite close to front line, and we do feel that it will be destroyed until the summer totally, because it was attacked like dozens of times already. But nevertheless, it still operates. So G is crucial during the war. And from this point of view, when we're talking about this G, I would start with G, then S. And I would like to say that war and our resilience is about procedures, governments, and people system. So social aspect is extremely important. And it's about our internal processes. But again, as far as we do believe, we still do not have quite clear picture of our victory, but we do believe that main part of our victory should be that we are not like by our own anymore. We should become a part of European Union, and we should become a part of NATO. Otherwise, it would happen again and again, not because some unpredictable, situations, but because of very clear logic of Russia to destroy it, to kill Ukraine as a state and us as a people. And from this point of view, European integration is not, just some abstract policies. Is first of all about European integration for us is first of all about principles, and ESG principles definitely are a vital part of this process. So for us, the fact that we are for almost 14 years are very active in ESG, and we are the first company who became the part of Global Compact. So our activity on this field makes us more prepared for European integration, makes us more, I would say, competitive, because we made a lot of changes inside of us even before the war, and actually during the war, which led us be ready to compete on European markets for European money. So from this point of view, ESG and SDG is something which is not just abstract like values which good to have, but for us, company in war, it's really important both from the point of view of our resilience inside of the country and from the point of view of our competitiveness and readiness to survive and to succeed in European markets, because we do not see ourselves as Ukrainian company. We are European investment and actually international investment company. For example, we have steel plant in Italy, we have steel plant in UK, we have coal mine because we are industrial company, we have coal mine in US, but in the same time we start very intensively invest in renewables in Europe. Today or tomorrow we will announce that we built already renewable facilities in wind and in solar in Romania, and actually it was the first renewable investments in Romania in 10 years. And again, why we do it? Because we because of, from one point of view, our experience to invest during the war, and from other point of view, our readiness to work in Europe because of ESG, not only, but also because of ESG. We are ready to do something which European companies, something quite risky, technically complicated, in some special conditions, which European companies not always ready to do. So from this point of view, we do something which was not done by others, and for us it's like a good positioning. And ESG stuff is part of our success, like a success secret.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you, Natalia. I think it is quite optimistic for us being in the SDG tent when we kind of realize that applying SDG and ESG principles actually helps companies even in the most difficult environments. So I will invite other panelists to join us. So Arne Cartridge, Thomas, and Sahil can, I think, take your seats according to the pictures, because I think otherwise it will look a little bit strange. Arne, you always, yes, that's how when your first name starts with A, you always are on that end of the panels. So just to kick us off with a common question, there's a growing number of reporting standards we talked about, but how do you place the SDGs in them? Because companies need to provide numerous disclosures in multiple jurisdictions. So how do you see kind of the SDG framework in it? Do you think it actually fits into that regulatory landscape, or it became a little bit obsolete because of that? So Arne, if we start with you.
Yeah, we were very active back in, leading up to the SDGs in 2015, and also promoting them afterwards, and actually also trying to translate them into what that actually, some of these, climate change or food security or poverty, etc. So for us, it was how do we translate that into not only for ourselves as a company, but also more broadly within our own industry or in the food chain. So what we did is actually then, how to actually map that into our own reporting. And I think, given that these are 2030 targets, we will then, continue following up on them accordingly. But obviously more in a formal way, it is the ESG frameworks and how that then comes into the different, so for example, one of the key things for us now is looking at, say, scope 3 and how we measure and how do we get that verified and how do we do that, So you get more and more granular as you move forward on this reporting, and obviously what is then becomes legal requirements over time also. But for us, we are fully dedicated on that journey to see how we kind of work on and actually make progress in relation to those targets. And some of that is what we do on our ourselves as a company. So it's on our own footprint, if you like, or our own engagement with customers or the end users or products. But I think, because we have one foot in the energy sector and one foot in the food sector, we are touching very big questions. So we're also trying to see, okay, how do we actually help influence beyond ourselves? So on poverty or social inclusion or prosperity. So for us, we have, since 2015, first in 2018, we actually did a major shift on our strategy and directional travel. Then we set the ambition to be growing in nature positive food future. So that's kind of in almost a translation of the SDGs into what that believes, for us as a company, where we want to go within the food chain. And then we have said that actually across 3 pillars of work. One is climate neutrality. The other one is what we would call today regenerative agriculture. So that's the whole farming practices and the whole farming system. And the third one is prosperity. And for us, if farmers are not prospering or benefiting from actually taking on more work, on climate, on biodiversity, on water, etc., then it will not happen. So those are the 3 pillars, and then we translate that back into the kind of the different, SDGs.
Perfect, thank you. And Thomas, you look at many companies. So what's your experience, and how do you think that tension, if there is any tension, because maybe we create tension when there is no tension really?
Sure, let me say a few words on both of those things. I was here in this room, I think, last year as well. Then I was speaking as Lombard Odier. Today I'm representing Holistic Investment Partners. Holistic is something we formed about 8 months ago together with our partners at Systemic. And what we're really interested in is trying to develop investable opportunities around these transitions, around systemic changes in our economy, including in the food system, including in the energy system. You might be surprised that I don't actually spend a lot of time looking at ESG reports of companies. And maybe that's a shock, or maybe that's like cursing in the church while being in the SDG tent, but I'll explain why. We wouldn't invest in a chemicals company or a cement company or you name it company just because they've got the best ESG score in the world. Not even if that ESG score is miles higher than another chemical company. Where our analysis and our search for investable opportunity starts is by actually looking at something like the food system as a whole, or the energy system, or the material system, and starting to think what's happening there. What's happening in terms of dietary changes? What's happening in terms of how we produce our food? What's happening in terms of how we rethink our relationship to land and how value chains might be reorganized? And only then, once we feel, well, actually, maybe this is going the way of precision farming. Maybe this is going the way of organic fertilizers or green ammonia. Maybe this is going the way of nature-based solutions and regenerative agriculture. That is what we spend a lot of our time thinking on. Once we form a conviction that, hey, green ammonia is the thing we want to be invested in, then we'll start looking at the companies. And yes, at some point we'll look at the ESG report as well to make sure they've got their ducks in a row. But a much harder question around sustainability for us is not just how companies operate. It's really, what is this economy going to look like by 2030 and why? And where are those opportunities going to be found that make environmental or social sense, but that also actually make a good deal of economic and financial sense to us?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Sahil?
Yeah, I mean, I like what you just said, because being the Chief Strategy Officer for the SDG Group, of course, I do a lot of time thinking about strategy. And strategy typically starts by not looking internally, but it starts by looking externally and understanding the ecosystems that you operate in, the mega trends that are impacting your business. And then you try to translate that into your business strategy. And strategy is always a little bit about choices, not just a little bit, it's a lot about choices, which we sometimes forget. So in that ecosystem, you can choose to position yourself here, there, or there, right? And the other thing that also is very important to me when talking about sustainability more broadly is that for me it needs to be rooted in a company's purpose and needs to be very closely interlinked to a company's strategy. Because otherwise it becomes very random, and then you also become very lost in explaining your sustainability story, and it also becomes very difficult to explain how you're linking to the SDGs, to whatever reporting directives are coming out, etc. So we really try to start with our company purpose, which is breaking barriers to well-being in our case, well-being primarily through hygiene and health solutions. That's where we think we can make a difference in the world. And then we start looking into how are the hygiene and health markets across the globe changing, what is impacting them, how are we having an impact both from a social sustainability perspective but also from an environmental social sustainability perspective. And we try to balance the two. First of all, we try to link them very clearly to our strategy. Then we try to balance them out, because we believe that both of them can't exist independently. There's always interdependencies, which are also very quickly overlooked. And then we look into how can we report on these things, and then where do we need to, so to say, to be compliant. And let me also say, when I say choices, and we had a lot of those discussions also internally within the executive management team to say, where do we still have choice when it comes to sustainability? And that's a very interesting discussion, because then you start to think about, okay, where do we actually want to really be leading and shaping the conversation, both on the environmental sustainability side, but also on the social sustainability side? Where do we want to lead and shape? Where do we want to engage in the conversation? That's the second level. And where do we need to be compliant? And sometimes then it becomes very heated, because it sounds like compliance means like you have given up. right? If you have these other two categories, you want everything to be in leading and shaping and engaging, but you have to make choices because your resources are limited. Your strength and your expertise is also, to some degree, limited. So it's all about making those choices to keep the E, the S, and the G somewhat in balance, connected to your strategy, and as impactful as possible.
Thank you. And I guess, Natalia, as a follow-up to what was just said, the choices. How do you make choices in this extreme situation, such as war? How do you prioritize your activities, both as business and also as a foundation?
From the business perspective, actually, we do not have too much choices. So we have to survive. And to survive, we have to do very particular things. For example, just an example, the strategy of our energy business was focused on moving out from power generation to renewables. Right now, power generation is something which helps us to survive. So, and actually, we do not have too much choice. On the other hand, we invest a lot, just tremendous amount of money. So this year we invest in energy infrastructure, in our energy assets, like $400 million, $200 million in building new renewables, and $200 million in repairing, but in a way like we call it build back better, our grids and our power generation. Do we have a choice? Do not invest in our power generation during the winter? No, we don't. Do we made a choice to invest more, but to do it in more like sustainable? Yes, mainly about grids, because power generation is power generation, coal is coal. So you can't, you can like create, you can do green power generation. It's impossible. So from the point of view of business, if we come back to SDG principles, like 16 principle is the main one for us. So we have to survive, and we have to bring Ukraine, and actually not only Ukraine, because unfortunately we do believe that it's not only Ukrainian war, and the danger for Europe is much bigger than probably it looks from Davos. I don't know, but we feel it, we know it. We know what we are talking about. So the 16 principle is main one. From the point of view of our foundation, and again, but nevertheless, we do a lot for communities. We do a lot for our employees, and we try to focus on things which are as close to our main business as possible. So it's not some nice creative process. It's very basic. So what we need to survive and to win from one side, and what we could do in the most effective way. Because if we are not able to do it in the most effective way, probably we will spend too much resources, and probably we will bring too small amount of added value. For example, we have a charity foundation which works in particular territories, focus on particular territories in which we have our industrial assets, because we have an infrastructure over there, logistics, etc. And we help people over there from one side. From other side, we are very good in big systematic processes, because as industrialists we are big. So we used to do, we are very good in doing something big. So we create big humanitarian processes. We create, for example, we created a big process of national adoption of orphans 15 years ago, and we do not do case by case. We create process, we create common process with the state. We create special portal with thousands of profiles of kids, and during 15 years, more than 15,000 kids are adopted with our support. So we are big, so we try to use this expertise of doing something big, systematic, to create a scale in our humanitarian stuff.
Thank you, Natalia. And Natalia mentioned in her opening remarks, the role of the G, the S and E in this volatile environment. But Sahil, how do you look at the relative importance of the E, S, and G and as the pillars of the both ESG and SDG framework?
As I said before, I think there's a connection between both of them, and then of course there's also a lot of interdependencies. So let's maybe a little bit concrete. At Essity, we produce hygiene and health product solutions and services. So let's take one particular product category. Let's talk for a moment about period care products, so pads, liners, tampons that we produce for personal care when it comes to your menstruation. So of course we know that these products have a huge impact on people's life because they enable you to manage your menstruation in a dignified, healthy and hygienic way. So we can, of course, put numbers to that impact. We enable people to participate in life. You can go to school. You can participate in work life if you're lucky enough to have access to these products, if you can afford these products, whereas there's a social component to these products. And we can tell these stories. And we also use that storytelling to break down stigmas, to increase awareness, to not just impact individuals, but also societies on topics that are under conversed. So there's a clear social component here. But then there is also a flip side, which is the environmental impact that these products have on this planet. Most of them are one-time disposable products that cannot be reduced. In order for them to perform to the degree necessary, we need to work with ingredients in these products that are not necessarily also, from a post-consumption waste perspective, environmentally friendly. But again, we also know that they're needed. We know that there is certain requirements also on these products when it comes to product safety, to hygienic requirements, etc. So there is this, but at the same time, we also know we can't go on as the world, as societies forever with these kinds of products. So we need to innovate as well at the same time to make these products more environmentally sustainable by using less materials, using different materials, changing consumption behaviors by putting reusable alternatives to the market, etc. But this takes time, right? So there is an interdependency, there is a clear connection, but the timelines are not necessarily always aligned. And that's something that we need to balance out. And I could give you these kind of examples for every product category that we're in, but that's also how we think it through. We start with the products that we put out there, and then we try to describe the social sustainability impact that these products have. And we're quite lucky to be in the hygiene and health space where the storytelling also, and to ourselves and to the external world, and also to prove it, not just with initiatives, but also with outcome KPIs, is rather easy in the categories that we are in. But the challenge, the flip side, is that the environmental questions are very big. And we're not afraid to answer these questions, but sometimes it takes a bit more time to come to solutions there. And right now, I would describe the time that we're in right now, and probably for at least another 1 or 2 decades to come, as a transition period. And we want to be leading this transition in the categories that we're in. But we need to, tackle it one by one. We can't have, even as our company, we can't have a global conversation about how is Essity doing in sustainability. We need to go product category by product category. You almost need to go SKU by SKU, and that is a very complex and long process, which we don't shy away from, but we also need to take our time to get it right.
Yeah, and that makes me think actually, on the prioritization, Arne, that will be for you. Food systems is one of my favorite subjects, and I guess the prioritization of the activities is even more important there, because on one hand, obviously, everyone needs food to be produced. On the other hand, the food systems are the good contributors to the environmental impact. So how do you prioritize your activities as a global player?
Let me just, because I wanted to follow up a little bit on what Thomas said, and because from a company point of view, I would actually almost echo what you said. So obviously, the whole ESG integrated reporting, etc., is very key for us on accountability, transparency, and all this, and showing progress. We set our targets, how do we measure, how do we deliver on it, etc. But I think for us, where we are now as a company, we are, we somehow, as I said, in 2018, started on a journey, and there's no way back. And that is about, we are dependent upon the energy transformation and the food systems transformation. And that implies that because we are such a kind of big actor in our own part of the food chain or in the kind of the system, that we actually have to help work on shifting that system. So that is actually understanding all the implications. And also for us is that, okay, over time our main clients have been agro dealers or the farmers, but actually the one who's going to decide the shift here is kind of the food companies and the regulator. And that means you have to work with a whole set of different level of collaboration, partnerships, solutions. And just this week in this room, actually on Monday, we had an extremely good session because we worked over the last 3 years on saying we need a unique way of identifying fields in the world. You know, everybody needs a unique address, but at the moment what's happening is that every company is building their own solutions, and it's going to result in chaos. Because as we accumulate more and more data, and we need to report data on carbon or biodiversity or water or the yield or the quality and all these things. But if everybody operates with different ways of naming that field, it's not going to work. So how do we get people to come together to actually build that soft infrastructure? It's a bit like what the industry did with the barcode. Today we take it for granted, but that somehow revolutionized part of that value chain for efficiency, etc. Or take the container. You know, unless we had the standardized way of doing a container, how would actually global trade function today? And we need to do the same in the kind of the food chain. So these are the type of, I'm using this as one example, but for us is trying to make this happen. And then I think, back to your question, how do we accelerate, the shift in the energy side? We are, ammonia could be actually a key solution to the hydrogen economy. And we have, of what is traded globally, about 1/3 of the trade. So we are a huge operator on ammonia globally. But how do we shift, initially to probably blue, so you carbon, you capture that carbon and you put it in the North Sea or wherever, which we have committed to doing, and we're doing projects in this, to green, but obviously then how much renewable energy is available to actually accelerate the green. But then you need the market demand. So as we were the first to team up with Team Kerry on the First Movers Coalition, and fertilizer being our main product, but what if the shipping industry actually got shifted to, instead of heavy fuels, to go for green ammonia? And how do we enable that? So we actually just recently launched the first green ammonia container ship in the world. It's not naturally for us to do that, but we need to showcase that it's possible. And then so these are the type of examples where we're trying to actually help shift the industry to become, and then obviously back to your, I guess what you indicated is that the food system is both extremely vulnerable to climate change, at the same time contributing more or less, if you include deforestation, to about 1/3 of global emissions. And we need to shift that in a way. And part of that is an extreme focus these days, and we've had actually with Anthony Blinken yesterday to get saying there's no security in the world without food security, and there's no food security without soil health. So we need to mobilize resources around that, and soil health is a common good, but we almost take it for granted. As we said yesterday, we need to stop treating soil as dirt, because that's what we're doing. So these are just some examples, but I think so yes, we have the whole reporting and accountability and transparency and see how we make progress on our own targets, but where we invest more, of our effort is actually these transitions. And in doing that at a time when the headwinds are much stronger. I'll give one example, in relation to the situation in Ukraine. We were probably the most integrated fertilizer company with Russia. We are the biggest user of natural gas, in industrial buyer of natural gas in Europe. We had to shift overnight. We were buying, phosphates and potash from Russia, shift overnight. And we've also been, key part of. So I've been part of the UN crisis response group, on how to actually keep the Black Sea Agreement, which we then obviously failed last summer, and we know all that kind of story. And the paradox is actually that, so we were totally impacted by, all the sanctions, etc. But Europe imported more Russian fertilizer in 2022 than they ever done in history. So figure that one out. So these are the type of geopolitics changing, increased volatility, increased conflict, climate change biting harder. So you want to kind of keep on those transitions at the time, and changing your business models at the time then these things are hitting you.
Thanks, Arne. And I guess, Thomas, that one will be to you. You know, how do you actually create demand, and how do you actually make sure that some of those big ideas and big potential business models actually see the day and are actually being implemented? Because I think Arne was indicating that there is one side what is possible, on the other hand where is demand, and then probably where is infrastructure as well when we are talking about some of those big issues.
Sure. I would say good ideas tend to create their own demand. And I would say the ideas that are going to break through and actually succeed in these transitions are the good ones. The way we're going to reach net zero is not going to be through solutions that are never going to be sort of on parity in terms of functionality or in terms of competitiveness. Where we really see breakthroughs in technologies is where you've got new energy technologies, where you've got new food technologies, say alternative protein or others, that actually are compelling from a cost perspective, that actually deliver the same functionality or better, and that are accessible at scale. Which is why we see this whole transition less as being solely built around the delivery of SDGs. We see it as an innovation cycle. Now, that innovation cycle may have been triggered for various reasons, because we're starting to realize, gosh, soil health is a thing. We might need to look into this, and we might need to develop some solutions. And lots of solutions will have been looked at. Some of them may make a big difference on the environmental side, but didn't make the cut economically. We look at them, we move on to the next solution. In the fuel space, ammonia is not the only sort of green fuel there, but it seems to have certain characteristics that make it attractive, so that's the one that's going to break through. So, of course, you can support that. You can, by being clever about where you spend public finance, you can accelerate that innovation cycle. You can drive industry towards the right solutions more quickly. And you can accelerate the improvement of these cost curves simply by subsidizing heat pumps. You can increase the adoption rate. It doesn't mean that we're always going to subsidize heat pumps. These things need to stand on their own right, and if they never would stand on their own feet, we shouldn't subsidize them. We should go for a different solution. So selective, clever use of public finance and private finance or philanthropic capital to accelerate these transitions make a lot of sense. But where you create the demand is where these new solutions are simply demonstrably better than the old system. And that is why we've got such a strong conviction in these transitions. We believe that these new food systems, new energy systems, will simply outcompete the existing version. And that makes for a compelling investment case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, please.
I just would like to say that actually, when we are thinking about some investments in Ukraine, we're exactly about new solutions, because old ones do not work in any case. And between invest a little bit less, but rebuild what we had, and invest a little bit more, but rebuild something new, definitely we will choose rebuild something new in case if we do see technology. And from this point of view, definitely we are right now in a position, not laboratory, but something close to it. And we test a lot of very specific things, especially in energy sector, just because, we're in position like that. And we will be in the same position with metallurgy, because, for example, our two steel plants in Mariupol are destroyed. When and if, more when than if, Mariupol will be liberated, it will be a question to us what we would like to do. So whether we will build up a new steel plant, and if so, what kind of. And we start to discuss it right now. But again, sometimes we do have technologies and we just could choose, and sometimes we do feel that there is no technologies and we can try. Investment cycle in industries is very long, and some technologies exist, but big international players do not implement it because they just invest like 5 years ago, and it's not time to invest to do another one, like big investment circle. And Ukraine, from this point of view, could be like a platform to testing something, as far as in any case during rebuilding institutionally and privately, Europe, US, and Western world will invest. So, but just.
I also want to just add something here, because you were asking about new business models. And I think sometimes in these discussions around sustainability, when it comes to green business building, for example, what I sometimes a little bit miss in the conversation is that typically you will have a couple of startups, showcasing, great innovations that they came up with, right? And they look very investable. But the question is also how you do bring these things to scale then, and how do they fit into the existing, in our case, for example, manufacturing landscape that we have. It's not that you don't want to, come to a solution. It's just that, it just doesn't fit, because also the solution cannot be that we, build everything from scratch new. Then it needs to fit in, right? And I think with the whole net zero ambition that you also mentioned, which we also have as a company until 2050, of course we need to transform from within to a certain degree, because we need to rethink manufacturing processes. In our portfolio, the tissue making is the biggest challenge. As far as I'm concerned, I think people in many countries across the world are going to use toilet paper and tissue paper for quite a long more time to come. It's a very non-net zero way of, let's say, going through life, but it will, exist for the time to come. So what is going to be the breakthrough technology in tissue making is also a little bit of an unanswered question, which we investigate quite a bit, and we have a couple of bets also out there, which I'm not going to bore you with now technically. But you need to make your choices. There also needs to come also a little bit from within the industry, because if it happens in isolation, the question of how can you then implement it and scale it as a big player who is going to have a big responsibility then also in reaching net zero is going to be very, very difficult. So one thing is the investment part. The other part is, the answers are not really there yet, and I would like to see more coalition in finding the answers to some of the questions that we will have to answer in order to reach net zero.
Yeah, and I guess also you're in a. Everyone on this panel is in a tricky spot, but Sahil, when you look at the healthcare industry, it was a little bit not in the top limelight when it comes to the sustainability discussion, etc. In principle, majority of any studies would say that the industry as industry is lagging a little bit behind because of also legitimate safety concerns, etc. So how do you balance this tension between the safety, the sustainability, and prioritization there? And what kind of innovations do you seek out for?
Yeah, so first of all, also when we look at our portfolio, there is of course a bit of a difference in terms of, let's say, also the external requirements being put on us, but then there's of course always the internal ambition level, right, which you can set as high as you want to set it. It goes back to the choice that I mentioned earlier, right, because you can of course have the opinion that some of these things also will make you more competitive in the long run, and if you lead a business and manage a business with that foresight, not just the short term but also the mid and the long term, you might take decisions, even in healthcare and in medical, which you can argue are maybe as an industry slightly behind to then also, go and lead the way there. We have, of course, a bit the advantage that we operate in a lot of categories in addition to healthcare and medical that are already a little bit more advanced, and a couple of speedboats have attacked us there internally and externally. And when I say externally, in terms of regulation, but also consumer and customer demands. And I certainly also should not fool ourselves. You sometimes already see today, also in healthcare tenders, for example, in our B2B business, we see a lot of demands coming our way, which might even sometimes already be outpassing, current regulation. So we always need to a little bit be one step ahead with that one. And then back to your point of how do you balance now safety, product safety, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. Again, it's something that we do category by category. We have, when it comes to safety, is an integral part of our social sustainability agenda in two ways. It's the product safety, but it's also the occupational safety component. We have 50,000 employees across the globe in sometimes also manufacturing environments that are rather challenging. Paper making is not the safest environment to be working in. So we have a lot of responsibility there that we take very, very seriously. So it's that occupational safety, it's the product safety, safety, it's the ambition to really have an impact from a social perspective, and then it's also the environmental part. And I already gave you one example of how we balance that out. But it is tricky, and I think also if we would only be following, let's say, compliance and regulation demands on us in all of the categories that we are in, we would always be somewhat behind. And this goes a little bit back to, also reading trends the right way and strategizing around external dynamics. It means that you always need to be one step ahead and also do a little bit of scenario thinking. And also to share maybe, when it comes to our net zero ambition, that's exactly the approach we're taking, because there's a lot of things that we don't know. And frankly, very few people who have committed to net zero exactly know how to get there, right? Maybe nobody. But what we do know is that there is a couple of things that we do know. We know our starting point. We know the end point. That is for every problem-solving situation a good spot to be in. So you know where you are. You know when to go. And then you have to strategize around different scenarios. So if A is true, what are we going to do? If B is true, what are we going to do? And that scenario planning is a very comprehensive and very complex exercise that again will take time, but you need to again also be a step ahead here, because if we wait today and we say we're going to wait, what's the next regulation wave that's going to hit us, we're just going to be one step behind always. So I think you always need to just always have your moves ready for whatever is going to come your way. But also don't forget the ambition level, because again, I think there is a choice that you have as a company to also go one step beyond what you have to do.
Can I, I mean, it's a little bit of a different entry point or angle to it, but since we talk about the SDGs and SDG 1 and 2 on poverty and hunger, and we are, since COVID, we are going backwards instead of going forwards, and things are getting worse. And if you look at they are kind of very linked in many societies, but the war, or I know that you go back to 2014, but let's say the last 2 years, the world is now more food dependent upon Russia. Food security is now linked to Russia to a degree that I don't think people really appreciate or understand. If we now have an escalation in the Gulf or in the Middle East, not only for trade, but it's also one of the largest fertilizer production places in the world around the Gulf. It's going to hit food security strongly. Increased cost. We, even in this country, people are feeling, the cost of food. People, So I think, so while we try to address the whole nature and climate aspect, there's a security issue that is coming, and it's increased conflict and also social unrest. And I think also if the prospect of Trump getting back into power or presidency next year, January next year, I would not be surprised if you see big civil unrest and conflict inside US. So we live at a time when we need to understand, okay, are we really going to deliver on these SDGs? And as companies, as we operate, so one is de-risking our own activities, but we also, as at least large actors, have a responsibility to actually see how we can collaborate and navigate these more volatile times.
Mm-hmm. And Arne, to follow up on that, you've been in Davos for a number of years, and there were different mega trends that were discussed here. And what would you think was over the years the ones that actually realized, and which ones were kind of going to the utopian good ideas that didn't really come through and didn't really have the impact as it was kind of projected?
I'm kind of schizophrenic about Davos, but so let me give just, I walked because I had to go to a meeting on the other side of the promenade today, and if you go on the other side of the Congress Center, it becomes just a show off and a marketing place, and I don't like that. I think it's gone too far. So I think if I go back to May a year and a half ago, we actually had a little bit less people, a little bit less of that show off, and it was more having the real discussions. So that development is something I'm concerned about. But anyway, but we need to meet. So at the time when we have all these issues that we need to tackle, to have a place to come together and have the right conversations and try to kind of collaborate and find solutions, put innovations behind it. So if that is facilitated the right way, I think Davos still has a unique opportunity to help all of us. I think over the years, it's varied a little bit, but they have helped and obviously with Klaus Schwab's initial thinking about multi-stakeholder engagement, so part of the process on the SDGs themselves were very much supported by discussions that took place here. The MDGs at the time became very much, global compact, where I more or less initiated as conversations in Davos at the time. So there's been a lot of Gavi, a little bit the same in the global vaccine, So there's many that have used Davos for those type of dialogues, accelerating and mobilizing resources and getting things to happen. So we need to use it for the best, but I think there's also, some risks here that we actually make this more of a show-off place than it should be.
And Thomas, any big surprises in the events you participated so far in this year's Davos?
Sure, look, you see quite a quick evolution, I think, in the thinking that's taking place around the question of sustainability. There's a lot more sophistication compared to a few years ago, not just at Davos, but just, I would say, in general, throughout the COP process as well. I think a few years ago, it was all about commitments, setting the right number. I think increasingly the discussion has shifted much more to how do you actually make that work and what are the real world implications of it. And the fashionable thing to say, and the thing you're supposed to say, is that we're moving far too slowly. And that's clear. Talk to any scientist and they'll explain to you in excruciating and literally excruciating, because it's a painful sort of analysis, how too slowly we're moving. Yet you can move too slow and still be moving very fast at the same time. There's no contradiction between those two things. If I'm out with some friends and I have a nice glass of beer and I've got another glass of beer and I know I'm running late for dinner, I might leave the bar a little bit late and run a marathon sprint home in record time, absolutely blasting all my personal records off the chart. I will still arrive too late, but I will have just set a personal record. That's a little bit how I would characterize what's happening today in the transition to net zero. We started far too late. We're going to miss 1.5 degrees. You can correct me if you feel otherwise, but we're probably going to miss it. That doesn't mean that this isn't an economic transition that's unfolding at a phenomenal pace. We've spent the last 2 millennia building up extractive value chains. We had the Rio Earth Summit back in the early 90s. We only reached the Paris Agreement in 2015. Now 2025 seems like the year we'll reach peak energy emissions. 2030, peak fossil fuel use. Too late, too slow, but by any sort of historical account, that is an industrial revolution of an unprecedented speed and magnitude and disruption. And it's okay to say both of those things. We should move even faster, but it is a pretty disruptive thing. Does Davos take credit for that? Look, I wouldn't say so. You can say there's a lot of criticism on the COP process and the Davos process, and all of those criticisms are fair. I would probably say without COP or without Davos, I don't think we would move faster. We would probably move a little bit slower.
Okay. Interesting. And Sahil, how would you see that, and also your experiences from what you're seeing here? So are you being impressed with the discussions that are happening, or rather depressed?
It depends, I guess, is the honest answer. So I think, all of the discussions that I have been participating here, I think they all, to some degree, come with the same notion. So in some discussions, it's very much about something is the right thing to do. It's a lot of discussion around ethics and values, and of course there's a very quick agreement on that in most cases, but still a lot of time is spent on kind of rediscussing kind of how much something is the right thing to do. I think that sometimes, to me at least, is a state that maybe needs to be a bit accelerated, since the topics are not really new, and things also, the arguments are not really that new that come to the table. So I'm not so sure if that advocacy around something is being the right thing to do should take the amount of time that it sometimes takes. Then I think the other discussions around something is the smart thing to do. You know, I think pretty much every big social and environmental problem on this earth has been priced by all the consultancies on the planet. So there is a business case pretty much also for everything. So we know that also a lot of things are the smart thing to do, and then sometimes some things are, you know, the required things to do. That's, you know, then where the G comes in, right? So I think I would like to see some of these discussions sometimes moving a bit more into action mode. It's sometimes a little bit unclear to me also after, you know, certain players have convened what exactly is going to happen next and where sits the accountability now and the ownership for certain things to be driving. And I think sometimes it would help to focus the discussion on a couple of few very actionable topics and then also prove, you know, a kind of like how to bring that forward. Because I think, you know, what is also in a world that we're living in right now with all the geopolitical distress, the polarization that is going on, also the pressure that we will see on, you know, the right, something being the right thing to do, and then also, you know, the smart thing, the investments will be challenged, resources will be, you know, redirected. So there's a lot of stress, you know, also coming to the table. So we will need some kind of different leadership, or to say it differently, what got us here is not going to get us to where we need to go. So we also need a couple new voices in the conversation, maybe sometimes. I also feel like it's sometimes the same people kind of like repeating the same things. I'm sometimes also missing a couple of, you know, young people also in the discussions. I know there's the young global leaders, but they seem to also be having some of their events, you know, on the side. I would like to see them more integrated in the conversations, because if we believe that what got us here is going to get us to where we have to go, I think that is very short-sighted.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And Natalia, any big takeaways from you? And I guess we'll start this round of the takeaways now, because I know some of you need to leave promptly at 45 past. So Natalia, what would be your big takeaway from Davos and from this discussion here?
This Davos was much more geopolitical than any Davos before for me, and this feeling. I mean, I didn't. Actually, except we had a couple of panels today in Ukrainian House, and again, so Ukrainian discussions regarding economy, and actually I think it was that, and that's it. And definitely we talk much more about this polarization and about this feeling that something on the air without any particular name. For us, this name is obvious. I do understand that it's an unpleasant name, so I will not say it. But you know, my father always said to kill a dragon, you should name it by its real name. Just think about it. Probably something like Third World War is the right name. It's how we feel. And actually, you know, for me, this Davos is about this huge movement, a huge shift. What it would be, how it should be named, probably we will know it a year after. Next January, we will definitely know what is going on right now. Just to, you know, to build on your thesis, we are inside of the biggest changes in our life and the biggest possible crisis. I mean, war is the biggest possible crisis. And during the crisis, I mean, there are three types of future, like manifested future, like a dream. And it's really important to have this dream, because this dream is like a source of hope. Usually in normal life, we have this prognosed future, and it's really important because on the basis of this prognosis, you build your own plans, actions, investment, you know, decisions, etc. And during the war, they are absolutely helpless, and you can't rely on any information, because next day you can wake up and all your prognosis, you know, were changed like totally. And the level of uncertainty is absolutely tremendous. But third type of our future during the war in Ukraine is like projected. I mean, like I would say, I don't know whether it's right term in English, but something which you do because it's totally under your control, which you really could do, and which will create a difference. And we try to focus on that. What we really can do, in what direction, it definitely depends on values, etc. And this is why ESG is still important, and CDG is still important, because it gives us some North Star, like during this uncertainty. But the speed is really limited by what we can do in our conditions, what is under our control. And from this point of view, actually, the speed is less important than direction. In our case, direction is much more important. I do believe that. In spite of all tremendous challenges we do have, the direction is right. And European integration, ESG, etc. And I don't think that we should just close eyes due to this geopolitical stuff and start to think only about, this 16 principle, which is really important. But I do believe that we should prioritize based on reality. And actually, real life is a little bit tough right now.
Well, that's probably the highest level of optimism that we've heard so far on this panel. So thanks a lot, Natalia. I think what I'm taking out from this discussion is really this importance of the mega trends and looking really from this helicopter view, and not only thinking about the current regulatory landscape, but also looking at what the future is and what are the future business models and how does it fit really into that direction. And probably we should be applying also this level of thinking when we will be designing the new SDG framework, or whatever it will be called, because it's coming soon for renewal, even though we didn't achieve those ones, but we will be thinking about the next level. So I think that, and also there is this level of geopolitical importance that is impacting the business. And it's interesting, if you look at the media coverage also and our discussion, we don't discuss about really the set themes of Davos for this year. We didn't even use the word artificial intelligence here. We talk about geopolitical, the context, and the megatrends, and the megatrends take over the agenda. And I think we can now have a short discussion during the coffee break for those who can stay. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for sharing our panel tonight. And we wish you good conversations till the end of Davos. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. Thanks.
You're amazed how often we're holistic
Thank you.
My name is Nigel Holloway. We are a research company, and we just put out a research report on 6 megatrends. And I'd like to send it to you. I'm interested in your company. I hadn't heard of it, and I was just reviewing it. So you're a public relations firm, but you obviously also do research?
Yeah, a bit broader probably than public relations. I would say, the communication without an S, with